Um, hey guys, it's me, the King again. Well, not the King, it's me, the creator again. Sorry about that. Back with another video. But as you guys don't know, basically I'm out of character king, right? I'm not doing a character, I'm not doing a bit, I'm not doing a sketch or anything like that. This is me, the man behind the channel, me going out of character and stuff, right? And if you're watching this today, that means it's my 18th birthday, and ironically enough, also today MK1 is supposed to come out, I believe. You know, everyone's been saying different things, right? When it's actually supposed to come out, when it doesn't, right? But yeah, essentially, like, I wanted to celebrate this day, both MK1 coming out and me turning 18, by sort of like doing an unscripted video where I go back into my past and sort of just, talk about like the fighting games that made me, right? Because fighting games, like, I thought about this like just before recording this. I thought about this just before recording this, right? Fighting games sort of made me who I am today, right? Like, without fighting games, I probably would have been on like a different path in life and stuff, right? And I just sort of wanted to go into the past and sort of talk about like how that is, why that is, and all that. This is going to be mostly unscripted, right? Because I want this to sort of come from the heart and stuff. While in script, I do have like talking points of like each of the games and stuff like that. But besides that, it's just going to be mostly unscripted. It's going to be from the heart. This is going to be me. Um, and yeah, I guess the story sort of starts with the demo for this game called Marvel vs. Capcom 2, right? I think I was like 4 years old when we moved to the first house. Essentially, we're moving between houses, right? And the second house sort of had to get repainted or something like that. So what ended up happening is we ended up staying at my mom's friend's house, right? And essentially, my dad brought in the PlayStation to play on like the TV they had, the PlayStation 3, right? And one of the demos there's like a lot of stuff he downloaded, right? I think he had like Wolverine wallpaper because back in the day Wolverine was like my favorite superhero. But he also downloaded the demo for this game called Marvel vs. Capcom 2. I remember it being the most mind blowing in the world, just seeing like the intro screen to that game, right? Like there's just all the Marvel characters on one side, the Capcom characters on the right side, right, and then Wolverine and Ryu meeting in the middle. At the time, I didn't know who he was. I just thought, holy crap, that's so cool. That one of my favorite superheroes, Wolverine, is shaking hands with the guy in a karate gi. That guy in the karate gi must be dope. And I remember my dad immediately telling me that that was Ryu from this game called Street Fighter. And that's sort of like where it started, right? That's how I was able to recognize Ryu like a month or a few months later, right? With the trailer for Street Fighter 4. And essentially, the trailer for Street Fighter 4 came out in about 08, 09, somewhere around there, right? I think I was 5. Oh, wait, I was 3 actually. Okay, never mind then. Like, I was about 3, 4 years old, right? And basically, that trailer was like mind blowing, like as a kid, right? Like, you have no idea how mind blowing it was. Just seeing Ryu and Ken fighting on there, like I recognized him, like I said, from Marvel's Capcom, so I was really dope to see him in his own environment, see him fighting all these characters, and see all these new characters, this Chun-Li character, this Jury character, whoever she is, this Cammy character, Ken, all these guys, right? Just fighting. That entire trailer was like mind blowing as a kid, and that was sort of like the start of, that was sort of like my first hyperfixation, right? Because nowadays I'm into things like Fallout, hopefully soon to be Starfield, if that's good or anything like that. And yeah, that was like Street Fighter was like my first higher fixation. That was like one of my most had games to play. The other one being this game called Star Wars: The Force Unleashed, right? And however, there was like a whole caveat to this entire thing, which is the fact that this was like way back in the day when we didn't buy many video games, right? Or I didn't ask for many video games, right? So I sort of like made my peace with the fact that no matter how hyped, no matter how excited I got for this game, I have more chances where I wasn't going to get it, right? So I was like just content with like being hyped for it and all that, and just not getting it. Um, and yeah, then the kiosks started handing out demos for Street Fighter 4, right? Ultra Street Fighter 4, I think specifically, like, and I started going like Targets, Best Buys, and GameStops, and just playing on those kiosks for like hours, right? I remember it was like a long time. I remember loving it so much. It was like playing Street Fighter 4 on those kiosks was like an experience. It was amazing. I remember like as a kid, like as a 4, 5 year old kid, right? Play Street Fighter on those games. It wasn't like any other experience, right? And then the trip to Vegas happened, because I think it was like the first trip to Vegas where we went to go meet my grandparents, right? To go meet them, to go have fun and all that. And I remember we weren't staying at Circus Circus. I think we were staying at another place, but we went to Circus Circus, right? And for those guys who don't know, that's just a hotel slash casino in Vegas that's themed after a circus. And I don't remember if we went to like a GameStop or some sort of game store, right? But we went to a place that was selling games, right? And I remember I was just going to go in to actually buy a game. I told my dad, hey, I want an actual game that we could take home, right? I remember looking around, and I remember I grabbed Ratchet and Clank specifically, right? Because that was a game me and Dad used to play way back in the day. We never finished one, but I remember we used to play it. I remember, hey, maybe Dad could probably beat this game or something like that. So I went up to him and said, hey, Dad, you want to buy this game? I remember he turned to me and said, you could get that game, or you could get this. I remember there was like a core memory, right? Like I remember, like I could close my eyes right now. I can imagine this moment. I remember him turning the game case around, right, showing me. I just remember Ryu's back. The excitement I felt when I saw Ryu's back to the camera and pulling up tied up his headband, right, and the words Ultra Street Fighter 4 written on the cover. I remember immediately dropping that game and grabbing that. I was like, yes, 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 I want it. That was like an amazing moment. Like I was so happy to actually buy that. I remember like for the rest of the trip, like I remember wanting to cut the trip short and saying, let's just go home and play Street Fighter. That's the only thing I care about, right? Like I don't even remember the rest of that trip. But I remember most things from when I was 4 or 5, right? But yeah, I remember being so excited. I remember wanting to cut the trip short and all that just to play Street Fighter 4, right? I remember being so excited just to play that game. And when I got home and actually played it, it was like amazing, you know? And Street Fighter 4 was sort of the start to another thing that I had with video games, right? Where I'd sort of have like my own headcanons to why these characters want to fight each other, mostly because of one, like after after beating someone in Street Fighter 4, right? You defeat them, your character would do like a win quote or something that's specific to the other character they're fighting most of the time, right? I remember that sort of like started in my head, well, let's have little headcanons as to why this person would fight that person, right? But there's also like the rival fights that also happen in Street Fighter 4 too, right? Where essentially if you made it through the arcade ladder, say as like Ryu, right? Then you'd be able to fight Ken as your rival, and then like there'd like be a whole cutscene and all that. And that sort of like started that headcanon too, and then like the actual stories, like the endings that each character would have. I remember wanting to play Street Fighter 4 just throughout the arcade mode as each character just to unlock those endings specifically, right? It was like truly amazing. Like Street Fighter will forever be one of my all-time favorite games and stuff, right? And like that game sort of like helped shape me to being who I am now. Like I remember like even when Street Fighter 6 came out, right? I told some of y'all the story already. I'll probably continue to tell the story, but when Street Fighter 6 came out, I remember like being up at like 11, getting ready to play that game, right? Because I already pre-downloaded. I was like, well, now I just need to stay up to like actually play the first few minutes, be one of the first people to play it, right? Remember when 11 hit and I was actually able to play it? I think I was on lone screen and it started to tear up, right? Because it was sort of like, it was like right before I turned 18, right? This game came out. It feels like the franchise that made my childhood sort of like it was like a full circle moment, right? Where it's like the franchise that made my childhood is here to like sort of celebrate the quote unquote end of it, right? Before I would go on to become a legal adult and stuff. So it was like this full circle moment for me. I remember nearly crying, and yeah, it was like an emotional moment when Street Fighter 6 came out. And yeah, like Street Fighter 6, like Street Fighter 6 could, for that reason, Street Fighter 6 could have been like dog water or whatever. It could have been trash. I would still say it was like one of my favorite fighting games of all time, just because of like the emotion it brought to me, you know, and stuff. But yeah, that's like my experience with Street Fighter, right? And then we go on to the next game on our list, or the next two games on our list, right? Marvel Kombat vs. DC Universe and MK9, right? MK vs. DC is like another one of my favorite fighting games, not because it's like a really good game, right? Or I see it as a really good game, right? MK vs. DC is one of my favorites because of like the memories it has, right? Because I didn't never actually own MK vs. DC in my life up until hopefully my birthday. I asked for it for my birthday. We'll see if they get it from me or not, but I didn't actually own that game in my life. The way I would play MK vs. DC is I would go to my cousin's house back in the old town, right? Right before I moved to this new town, I lived in like the old town, right? And there, I would go to my cousin's house and constantly be playing that game. And some of like my favorite memories come from like that game, right? Like I remember there was like this one time we were all like going through the arcade mode, right? And we and all of a sudden we all had to face Batman, right? And for some reason, this Batman's AI was like harder than most. We were all getting our asses kicked. I remember I tried to like wage psychological warfare on the Batman AI by playing as Joker, right? And if I play as Joker, he'll be weakened or something. He kicked my ass so bad. I remember vividly him doing that one fatality where he quite literally throws a battering at you, and like it's like a sonic battering and it calls down all the bats and eats you, right? I remember that specifically. I remember, yeah, that was kind of funny, but also kind of sad that I didn't beat him too, right? I remember that was also a time when like my cousins would like write down the actual codes for the fatalities, right? I remember they would get really hyped when they actually perform fatalities on other characters too, right? But like one of my favorite memories playing that game though was like I remember like my cousins, they had like these friends that would come to his house often, right? On the same days I would go to his house too, right? I remember they would always be playing on 2K, NBA 2K or Call of Duty or Mortal Kombat, right? And while we were playing MK versus DC, I remember specifically we're doing like you have to beat the winner or something like that, King of the Hill style. And this one kid that was their friend, right? He kept playing Shang Tsung, and he was spamming some move. I forgot what it was, but he was spamming some move. Everyone was getting pissed off with him to the point where like, yeah, we're not playing this anymore. We're gonna go outside and play football. It's like, oh, okay, I'll try. Y'all guys get ready. I'll get your shoes on. I'll try to beat this kid one more time, right? I guess he like took pay on me at that moment or something like that because I remember the two characters we chose. He changed his character and chose Liu Kang, right? And I changed my character. I chose the Flash, right? Essentially, the fight starts. I remember like discovering this one move where essentially he does like Flash does this weird little swim move where he sticks his arm out in the air and drops it down, and like he could do that really fast and keep spamming that move. And it'll just go like it was just like rapidly hit him with that move, right? I remember like another move where like he punches you 20 times and then uppercuts you after that. I remember I just kept on spamming those moves, right? And I remember my cousin, the older cousin, right? He came back in and said, "Oh crap, hey, Kang, he's doing it. He's beating him. He's actually beating him. Dang!" And like they all cry around. And you know the headcanon that I have for that story. Every time I tell the story, I always say that I beat him, but I beat him to an inch of his life, and then he found his foot and he kicked my ass too. But they were still proud of me, right? They're still championing me as being closest, as being one of the closest that ever actually beat him, right? You know, so that's like another core memory that I have from that game too. I remember it was that game where I first like learned to do my first special move, right? It was with Sub Zero. It was his ice ball, and that's why like anytime I'm like mimicking an ice ball, I just go da 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 da, because I like have vivid memories of Sub Zero saying that. That's why Sub Zero is sort of my favorite Mortal Kombat character too. And then MK9 comes out, and they replace MK vs DC with MK9, right? I didn't mind too much. Like I personally preferred like MK vs DC because it had Batman, Superman, and Flash and all that, right? But I was fine with them playing MK9, right? And I remember I don't have any like specific memories with them. I just remember like loving to play as like the guest characters like Freddy Krueger. My favorite was of course Kratos when we would do the King of the Hill matches. I remember like winning a few matches with Kratos. Like they would never choose Kratos. I to this day don't know why. Maybe they're using tournament rules. Maybe they thought he was weak. I don't know, but I remember beating them with Kratos and stuff like that. Right? I remember that being a really dope experience too. I remember they always close my eyes like anytime there's a fatality, specifically Quan Chi's where he rips someone's legs out and beats them to death with it. I remember them closing my eyes for that. I don't know why, but yeah, I just remember that being like a dope memory too. And then after that, I guess it was Marvel vs. Capcom 3, right? And essentially Marvel vs. Capcom 3 was like a game I just played a lot, right? Like I remember it was like a game I played a lot at Best Buy. And I remember loving it so much because like the Marvel characters fighting the Capcom characters, but they were in 3D this time, right? I remember it just being so dope. It's like Wolverine, you know, beating people as Hulk, spamming like this one move, where like he would like pin him to the ground and just keep on pinning him. I remember doing that to the AI a lot. I remember thinking it was like so funny. I don't know why I wasn't hurting anyone. I was being toxic. I was just hurting the AI's feelings. But yeah, and I just remember like I don't have any specific memories from that game either outside of the fact that I thought the cards were cool and I thought it was dope they could fight Galactus. Like I remember that boss battle being good too. But yeah, that's like a really core fighting game with me. And then another core fighting game that's like not a biggie, like that's not a biggie at all since we're here. Street Fighter Cross Tekken. I didn't even like Tekken back in the day, but I remember like I remember like wanting a crossover between Street Fighter and Tekken because I always saw Tekken as being like a 3D Street Fighter, right? Like I don't know how no one else sees it that way, where if Street Fighter just went 3D and rebalanced its entire system to be around that, right? But yeah, I always saw it as like just the 3D Street Fighter, so I thought, it would be dope if Street Fighter and Tekken crossed over, right? I don't care if it's the 3D style or the 2D style, I think it would just be dope. And then Street Fighter Cross Tekken gets announced, I remember being like, oh, that's dope, right? I wasn't hyped for it, but oh yeah, that's dope, right? And then I remember we were at like a GameStop, right? I remember this clearly. We're at like a GameStop and we're looking for games that me and my dad were, and I kept on trying to choose fighting games. I remember I came across Tekken Cross Street Fighter. I was like, or Street Fighter Cross Tekken. I was like, you know what? Let's do it. Let's play Street Fighter. Let's get Street Fighter Cross Tekken. That's like another fighting game I sunk a lot of hours into. I didn't ever bother learning the special moves or combos, but me and Dad, we did have fun playing tag team in that game mode, so that was like a pretty sick experience. And then now it's another milestone, Injustice. The first Injustice, right? I remember playing the crap out of Injustice, but I had myself. Essentially, Injustice, I started playing that game at a really special time in my life. I'm during what I like to call the Dark Ages, when I was grounded for not writing my names on papers, right? Again, 95 is over that. Essentially, I was like grounded. I wasn't allowed to play video games or whatever. However, Dad still pre-ordered Injustice for me, and like I remember the day we went to buy it, and all that was like a back cover. Mom saying, "Just because you pre-ordered it doesn't mean you're gonna play it or whatever." And I'm very demoralized over that, right? And yeah, I just remember like one day, Dad, this was still while Mom was in the house. He wasn't being sneaky or slick or anything like that. He's like, "Hey, you want to play Injustice with me?" I was like, "Sure." I remember making Deathstroke immediately because it was like also around the time Arkham Origins came out, or was like announced or something like that, right? So I remember that's how I fell in love with like Deathstroke and stuff like that, just because he was like in the advertisements, not seeing him in the actual game, but from like the advertisements. So Deathstroke immediately became a main, and it was dope. And then I remember like I was playing that throughout the move too. That's like awesome memories when I was landmarked when I was moving from the old town to new town. I was playing Injustice all the way. I remember like when Scorpion came out, right? I'm pretty sure it was back when Xbox was still doing the gamer points for DLC stuff. I remember I bought Scorpion with all my gamer points, right? I remember it was like dope. So just play as Scorpion in a DC fighting game, right? So like the old days, right? I remember he was like my main. I remember beating a bunch like during the move, right, when all the people from the new town came to the old town and just sort of like helped us like move and all that. I remember we played Injustice together. And I remember I kept beating them with Scorpion and all that, right? It was dope. And yeah, I just have very fond memories with Injustice and all that. And that was sort of the game where it really started coming in, where like the seeds of me wanting to be like a writer and to tell stories at the very least started coming in, where I started really making up my own headcanons about, well, why would, why would Wonder Woman fight Doomsday? Who is Doomsday? In fact, I had no idea who Doomsday was back in the day, but why would Superman want to fight Deathstroke, right? Why would Lex Luthor want to fight Bane? Why would Bane want to fight... Yeah, I'd just be asking that, and I'd be making up stories in my mind, right? And it was dope. It was like an experience. It was a great experience, right? And playing Justice, those series being played, which is ironic because then MKX and Injustice 2 would come out and they would have the pre-fight dialogues. I remember that blowing my mind, like, holy crap, that's dope, right? Speaking of MKX was like one of those games I was hyped for but never like actually bought, right? I remember thinking like the trailer of what's called Scorpion versus Sub-Zero, right? And if I remember that being like really hype, I remember Farrah Tor. I remember she was like a dope looking character. They were a dope looking character, right? I remember that. But I never like ended up actually buying it, right? I play it nowadays, but back in the day, I remember not doing that. I also remember my mind being blown when like all these horror characters, when Jason, Predator, and Alien came out. I had no idea who Leatherface was back in the day, but I remember when those three came out, I remember my mind being blown and all that. And yeah. And then I guess the next fighting game is the Street Fighter Collection. I have no specific memories on that. That was like the first fighting game I ever went on my way to buy with my own money, right? I didn't really take that collection seriously. I remember the game I wanted to play being Alpha 3, but the game I actually ended up playing and maining being Street Fighter 3 Third Strike, right? My first star main being Dudley, obviously. He's like one of my favorites from Street Fighter 4. One of my favorite fights was him versus Balrog. That was like one of my favorite intro dialogues. I would play Street Fighter 4 through that the entire game just to play as Balrog, just to fight Balrog and see that intro animation over and over again, right? So obviously I made Dudley in Third Strike. But besides that, I didn't like actually get into it competitively. However, the fighting game I did end up getting into competitively was, of course, MK11. I use competitively in quotes, right? Because I started getting into MK11, I think, around 7th or 8th grade. I'm going to say 8th grade. I remember starting getting into MK11 in 8th grade, right? And essentially, MK11 was like the first one I started taking seriously. I didn't play competitively. In fact, I didn't even touch the rank mode for the entire time I owned MK11, right? I started playing around the time the Joker came out. I never actually bought him until like way later on, but I remember like loving MK11. I remember like that was the first time I went like the fundamental like footsies and like whiff punishes. I remember that was like the first time I actually started using moves because I was like using Joker's gun in like Injustice and all that, doing those. I remember like actually trying to figure out how to do special moves, like how to actually utilize them and all that. You know, that was the first time I ever learned like the combo. One of my favorites being Liu Kang, where if you go press forward A, you can launch him in the air, and then if you go back forward A, he could do his flying kick, and then if you amplify that, he'll do the amplified flying kick, and that's like a shit ton of damage. It was like one of the first combos I ever used online, right? And then from there, started there are more combos. Of course, I'm very rusty now. It's been a while since I played MK11, but yeah, so I'm recording this after the fact, but MK11 was also the part where I got that whole gym bro mindset with fighting games, right? Where because 8th grade in middle school was like a shit show for me, right? I said this in my bunker video, but like I was constantly being bullied and stuff like that. And you know how gym bros sort of when they're going through stuff, they go to the gym and all that. MK11 was a start for me where if I was going through something, I would just go play MK11. I would be playing fighting games, and now fighting games are sort of like my gym, where I see where I'm improving and all that, right? And I sort of play like that. Yeah, there's that aspect of what MK11 did for me too. Yeah, and like I said, nowadays I play MKX, especially on this arcade stick that I got. I play MKX, and then MK1's coming out. I played the beta. I had a video recorder for it, but like there was this entire storyline that I had that I didn't want to like. I wasn't too sure if I wanted to make canon to the Kingdom storyline or not, so I just ended up not posting that. But yeah, MK1's looking dope. Street Fighter 6, like I said, that's dope. I saw the video I made on like Comic Con and all that, the over-dramatization. I got my ass kicked in a Street Fighter 6 tournament, but that ended up being one of the best days of my life. Yeah, I was new Martin MK games. I played Street Fighter 3 Third Strike on Fight K2. Capcom vs. SNK2. Like, I think I'm trying to make my. Sorry, I'm very nasally right now. There's like 6 season over where I'm at. But I'm trying to make my name for myself on the Capcom vs. SNK2 Fight K community, right? And yeah, essentially, fighting games are a very important thing for me, right? They're important to me. They've made me who I am. Like I said, if I hadn't playing fighting games, I'd probably be a completely different person now. But I'm kind of glad that that's not the case, because now look at me. I'm a very normal and good dude. Thanks for watching. And happy birthday to me.